All right, man, peace. So retired Hall of Famer and former superstar guard Gary Payton made an appearance on the Stephen A. Smith and Max Kellerman show to talk about the current state of the NBA and also to chime in on the LeBron James versus Michael Jordan debate. So let's see what he has to say.
Because before you became an NBA champion and a Hall of Famer, born and raised right here, this is your home. I know we asked you in the commercial break if you were headed to Cleveland, and you are not, and tell us why, because it's a great cause.
Well, no, the NBA has asked me and Matumbo to go to Puerto Rico and do a relief thing, and we're going to spend Game 4 with them out there. We're going to be there meeting and greeting, watching the game with them on Friday night. It's going to be a good thing, man. We need to do relief things like that. I think the NBA is
Let me switch this back to basketball because I'm talking to one of the great defensive players in NBA history.
One of the great all-around guards in NBA history. He's right there with Michael Jordan as arguably the greatest two-way guard in the history of the league. Like, he was that good on defense. And of course, Michael Jordan was far greater than him offensively, but Gary Payton was a multiple-time 20-point-per-game guy, averaging 8-9 assists a season, and also leading the league in steals and playing lockdown defense. Oftentimes, players will lead the league in steals, but it's just because they're gambling. They don't play very good defense one-on-one. Gary Payton did it all.
That made a career of putting cats on lock and key on a nightly basis. We were talking defense before we got to break. My whole thing is this. Forget the Jordan LeBron comparisons per se. I've never seen Jordan run from a defensive assignment. In my opinion, I don't want to use the word running because I'm not trying to disrespect LeBron. But I will say this. There have been many occasions where I would have liked to have seen him accepting the tougher defensive assignment, and that is not something that he has been prone to do. If anybody would know whether or not that statement is true, it would be you, GP. Your thoughts?
Well, that's not quite fair, Stephen A. Smith. I mean, let's be for real. I'm all for objective critique of anyone, especially entities that are placed as paragons or put on pedestals to be idolized. I'm all for that. But if we're going to be fully objective, LeBron James has guarded Kevin Durant. He's guarded Paul Pierce. He's guarded Vince Carter. He's guarded Kobe. He's went up against the best players of his era, and he's tried to guard them. In the 2011 playoffs, he pretty much shut down Derrick Rose, who was the MVP that season. Once again, he guarded Paul Pierce. In 2012, he attempted to guard Kevin Durant. Now, did he guard most of those players for 100% of the game? No. But he did check them. So that's not quite fair.
Well, it is true. I think it's a different little era with them, too. Michael Jordan always took it to a point that he wanted to guard the best player, even with myself. Even if I start talking trash to him, he would always tell Scottie Pippen, look, I'm taking Gary tonight. He would always take the best basketball player on that thing. But I think now in this era, LeBron doesn't want to tire himself out because he does so much on his Cleveland basketball team. It's a difference. Michael Jordan really didn't have a mindset of, I don't care if I do tire myself out, I'm going to go and take this guy because I want to prove to him that I am the better basketball player. I think that LeBron doesn't have that mindset that he wants to do that every night because he knows that he does so much on his team and he has to exert himself so much that he doesn't do it.
So in other words, Mr. LeBron James has caught himself in between a rock and a hard place. He's like someone who wants help but does not know how to ask for it because he's already created or helped to create this narrative for himself, this image for himself as someone who has to do it all. So if he were to divest any of his responsibilities, many of his naysayers may say, well, wait a minute, LeBron, so you mean to tell us that you've been doing all these things for all this time when you could have delegated some of these other responsibilities to other players who can do them and maybe economize your energy expenditure a little better? So in other words, you've been greedy this whole time, LeBron. Please understand, LeBron James thinks on that level. He understands the ramifications of divesting responsibilities. He knows how it's going to be perceived if he does so. So he pretty much has to go down with the ship in regards to the overall image that he has concocted for himself. He's almost like the Wizard of Oz. Except the Wizard of Oz was a complete charlatan. LeBron James has substance. He actually is an all-time great. But he does not know how to get help. What I mean by that, even if he gets talented players, he doesn't know how to trust them enough to give them the power to actually have executive rights on that team, meaning to call shots. He doesn't trust anyone because he's created this boogeyman, this specter that hovers over him, where I'm a king, so I always have to call shots. And if I don't allow myself to be the one who calls the shots, someone else is going to fuck it up for me. And I can't deal with that level of regret if I allow someone else to call shots in my life. And to a degree, I understand it. But it can be something that holds him back. Jordan, for all the pomp and circumstance about how he checked the toughest players every night and things of that nature, he understood things on a macrocosmic level in regards to what his role was on the team, and he can't do everything and win as much as he can. And that's the thing. LeBron is going to look back on his career, and he may never admit it on television or to the public, but he's going to say to himself, wow, I'm 3-7 in the finals, or I'm 3-8 in the finals, or 4-9, and I easily could have been 8-5 or 9-4 had I simply let go of some of the hubris and actually learned how to play in a real system.
But I'm saying to you, Gary, I've never seen them do it. I'm talking about, I have never seen a game where LeBron has come out from open and tap and said, you know what, I got him. I'm shutting him down. I've never seen him do it ever.
I haven't seen it neither, and it's just, that's the case, but like I said, I haven't seen it. I said...
Gary kind of throwing LeBron under the bus.
And that is, it's the truth, but I have to be in LeBron's case too, because like I said, he has to do so much on these basketball teams. He does not have Scottie Pippen. He does not have guys like that who can help him out on a Chicago team and that situation.
Well, he had Kyrie Irving, but he ran him off.
I think it's just a little different.
A bunch of points on that. One, I totally agree with the amount of work LeBron has to do on offense. It's one of the reasons you cannot compare offensive players' stats now to your era. Because James Harden, Westbrook, LeBron, the primary ball handler, the usage rate is so high on offense, they're going to accumulate stats.
And beyond that, it's so much easier to get to the basket today than it was back in the 90s. That's why when you look at a Michael Jordan stats in the finals and you say, well, against Seattle and against Utah, he was about a 43% shooter in the finals. The level of defense that they played back then was far more based on stopping penetration to the basket than today. They actually want you to get to the cup. They want you to get to the free throw line because penetration is going to open up three-point shot opportunities. The NBA wants that. Back in the 90s, especially the late 90s, everything was about congesting the paint, keeping the best players out of the paint. That's why Jordan developed the fadeaway.
And they don't understand that just because you average a triple-double doesn't mean what it would have meant in your day. No doubt about it. By the same token, there's much more switching and stuff like that now, and LeBron can guard all 5 positions. Not as much need for him to guard the best player on the other team all the time.
LeBron James not only cannot guard all 5 positions, he can barely guard one position anymore. He can barely guard one position for elongated stretches anymore. And he has not been able to guard 5 positions for about 5 to 6 years. This nonsense that LeBron James can guard 5 positions is laughable. Name one center in the NBA of note that LeBron James can guard. Give me a break.
All the time. But look, I'm not arguing that LeBron is Jordan. Jordan's the greatest of all time. I'm not arguing LeBron is Jordan. But I am arguing that people don't appreciate how deep into his career LeBron is already. Mike played in college, so he's 21 when he hits the league. He takes 3 years off. By the time he had this many miles on his NBA legs, he was in Washington. Now,
how do you know that? Has anyone really provided the numbers on that? To say that by the time Michael Jordan had the same mileage on his legs that LeBron James had, he was in Washington? How many miles did Michael Jordan put on his legs at North Carolina? How many miles did he put on his legs in the Olympics in 1984 and touring for Nike in the offseason? I mean, I don't understand how people can make these comparisons. And not only are people not unaware of how many years LeBron has played and how much mileage he has, we're over aware because we get reminded of it literally every day. that this was LeBron James' 15th season and who's played this well in their 15th season and all this other silly shit, when it's a completely different era.
Now, in Washington, I was there, and I hosted Around the Horn that whole year. In Washington, I used to see he didn't always take the best defender. Even in Chicago, Scotty also, a lot of the times, because he was such a great defender, took the best guy.
I agree with that. That is very true. Michael Jordan did not always guard the best offensive player on the other team. As a matter of fact, often that assignment went to Ron Harper. Michael Jordan, his last couple of seasons in Chicago in 97 and 98, would oftentimes guard a good wing, but not the best one. If it was a great point guard, sometimes Jordan would start off on him. Like, sometimes Jordan would guard a Damon Stoudemire, but Damon Stoudemire was just too quick. He was too quick. Jordan, for the most part, would guard like a Chris Mullin, of a Sean Leonard, players like that, who were not too much of a threat. Because by his early 30s, he had to make sure that he had some energy on the offensive end. But it wasn't like LeBron, where they had him playing in a zone. He was guarding his man up, and he was the best defensive player at his position in the league still, even though he was not always asked to check the opposing team's best player. Now, in cases like a Reggie Miller or someone of that ilk, that oftentimes would go to a Ron Harper. But every once in a while, Mike would say, yeah, I'm going to stick Steve Smith tonight. I'm going to play Glenn Rice tonight. I'm going to guard him for stretches. Things of that nature. But there are a lot of players from the 90s that people really don't remember, don't know about. Like, Michael would guard Mitch Richmond, who was one of the top shooting guards in the league back then. He would guard Clyde Drexler, still. But yes, in his last year and change, sometimes they would say, Mike, let's conserve some energy. You're not going to guard the opposing team's best wing player tonight. You're going to guard somebody else. Like in the 7-game series of 98, it was Scottie Pippen who was guarding Mark Jackson. Michael was guarding Chris Mullin, and Ron Harper was guarding Reggie Miller because they didn't want Mike having to chase Reggie all across the baseline, from baseline to baseline, wearing his legs out. But Michael did check Reggie Miller in some of the most important moments. And you know what's so funny now that it comes to my mind? People love talking about how Jordan pushed off against Brian Russell in the finals in Game 6, but you never hear anybody talk about how Reggie Miller pushed off on Jordan to hit that game-winning three-point shot, and that push-off was 10 times as blatant as Michael Jordan's. He pushed Jordan with two hands, caught the basketball, and fired off that three-point shot. And there were a series of bad calls down the stretch of that Game 4 in 1998 that cost the Bulls the game. Nobody talks about that, though.
I'm just saying, LeBron is asked to do things. The standard for him, partly because he's chasing Jordan, is unrealistic. His 15th season, best player in the league, doing all that on offense. Of course, he's not going to guard the best player on defense.
But we're not going to put.
Well, not only is LeBron not guarding the opposing team's best player, he's not guarding anyone. He's playing in a zone. That's what the issue is.
To put Washington in this category. He's 40 years old, so I don't want to talk about that because that's.
Well, that's a straw man argument that a lot of desperate LeBron James superfans like to use. Like Shannon Sharp will go to that one when he's desperate. What about when Michael was in Washington?
That's not MJ. So you can't put MJ in that. But as we understand, in Chicago, Scottie Pippen was a great defender. So what did Phil Jackson do? Phil Jackson said, "Hey, let me get Scottie Pippen. We're going to state of mind of what the coaches want and how to win games." Well, that's what we're trying to say. But in our era, I'm just trying to tell you, we had better basketball players. To me, I'm really going to tell you that because we had 8, 9 teams that had 4 players on it that could be all-stars. So what I'm saying, so it's it's a different league than what you're talking about right now. And yeah.
Well, of course, Gary's going to open up that can of worms. Let me say this, and I've said this for a very long time now. That Seattle team, they would certainly be a championship-level team today. I've said that in other videos. A lot of times people don't really understand how great the teams were that Jordan went up against in the finals. They claim that he did not play great teams in the finals. It's normally because they're trying to push or promote LeBron James and take away from Michael Jordan. Even Isaiah Thomas, being bitter like he is, tries to claim that, well, Jordan was dominant in the 90s. Yes, he was dominant over his competition for a longer period of time than any other player in the modern era. That's what he was. Now, in the 90s, the Seattle SuperSonics, they were a great team. They would have done extremely well today because they had stretch big men like Sam Perkins, who could really stroke the three-point shot. Derek McKee could stroke the three-point shot. Detlef Schrempf could stroke the three-point shot. Of course, Gary Payton, They had Sean Kemp, who was like the Blake Griffin of his day, except even more explosive. That team was a championship-level team. They just ran into the Bulls.
Yes, you saying a lot of guards, 2 guards have been changed to 1 guard. Yeah, a pound of basketball. And this sweet basketball about switching, don't switch. Stay on it.
That's what they do.
Yeah, that's what they do. So we can't do that.
That's right. That's what they do. And listen, when
Now, that's the best point. There's too much switching going on today. Nobody guards their man anymore. That's one thing. Back in the 90s, guys stayed on their man.
When the bad boy Pistons were playing defense, it wasn't any switching. Chuck Daly was like, man up. Hey, get your man.
Or
Come sit down.
they'll say hedge up, get through your man.
Stephen A. you have a story about Jordan that I love, about how he used to antagonize opponents before games. Because, in the fight game, like Muhammad Ali would talk smack before a fight. He's trying to get you off your mental game so he has an advantage. Stephen A. related a story to me where MJ is talking smack before because he wants you at your best so he can beat you at your best. MJ is psychotically competitive. Of course, no one can
not just that with his own team. Once upon a time, I will tell this story. They were in Chicago, and you had players. I forgot whether it was Bill Winnington or Stacey. I forgot who it was, but it was some role players with. And Scottie Pippen, when it was a playoff game, and Scottie Pippen was like, "Come on, y'all, let's go. Bring your A game tonight." Michael Jordan was in the elevator. He said, "Bring your A game. Please, bring A game. How about that? Bring A game." That's what he said. Now that's what he said to his own teammates. And I can't use the word that he used when he called them. You know what? Bring A game. He called them something, but I'll leave it at that. You in this era, Gary Payton, real quick. You in this era, if you had to, what would you, with the old school rules, what kind of offensive players would these guys have been against you? In this day.
Well, if they use my old school rules, they know I'll lock their ass out.
You ain't sorry. You know damn well you said that shit on purpose. I would love to have seen Gary Payton guard a Steph Curry, though. You know what? I would really have loved to have seen Gary Payton guard James Harden. That shit would have been funny.
Anybody down.
It's a different game now. Before we let you go, is this series over?
I don't think so. I don't think this series is over. I think they're going to get one in Cleveland. I think they should have got game 1. It didn't work, but this is what it is. I think that they're going to get home. They're going to get a little comfortable. They better get this one. They got to get Wednesday. I think they're going to get Wednesday.
How about this real quick? Because you asked about the defense and locked them down. What about the rules in this era? What you would have done on offense? Because you were averaging 20 plus back.
Absolutely. A lot of people don't know how great Gary Payton was. He was giving you 20 and 8, and the best defense in the NBA during the 90s. I would say from 95 onward, he was probably the best defensive guard in the NBA, maybe even greater than Jordan on a night-to-night, possession-by-possession basis. Now, when Jordan wanted to lock you down, nobody could guard you like him because he had long arms, huge hands, great anticipation, and fast reflexes. But Gary Payton was unbelievable on ball defensively. And in this era, offensively, you couldn't touch him. He had a great left hand or right hand finish at the cup. He just was not phenomenally explosive. He wasn't somebody who was going to jump over you, but he could dunk the basketball, obviously. He was 6'4". But I would have liked to have seen Gary Payton today. His game certainly would have translated because he used to pull up for 3 off the dribble.
Back then.
Well, you better understand. I'm gonna go put him on the block, and I'm gonna put him in the torture chamber.
Absolutely great post-up scorer also, Gary Payton. But I mentioned this a long time ago. Back in that era, all the great offensive players had a high-level post game. If you couldn't post up back then, you were not considered a great offensive player. Penny Hardaway, Michael Jordan, all the great backcourt players also had great post-up game. Even Tim Hardaway at 6 feet had a good post-up game. Rod Strickland, so on and so forth. It's just that today's players uniformly are better from 3. Back then, you didn't have 4 men who really could stroke it uniformly. Once again, you had a Sam Perkins. Every once in a while, you had a guy who could step back. But back then, really, you didn't have it like that. Today, there are far more big men who could shoot the 3 from long range.
And what we call it out here with the Oakland Raiders?
But anyway, that's it on Mr. Gary Payton, all-time great. Fortunately, he was able to win a championship in '06 with the Miami Heat. A lot of people might not remember that because he was a bench player at that time, but he did hit a huge shot. I'm trying to remember which game it was. Either game 3 or 4 where he hit that big-time shot to seal the game. But anyway, peace.